what will maintain our position in the world? The ability to shoot a 25-foot jump shot or the ability to solve a quadratic equation? And we need to put the things into proper perspective. And, many teachers, many teachers have told us when we put a Carson Scholar in their classroom, the GPA of the whole class goes up over the next year. And it's been very gratifying. We started 16 years ago with 25 scholarships in Maryland. Now we've given out more than 5,000, and we're in all 50 states. But we also put in reading rooms. These are fascinating places that no little kid could possibly pass up. And they get points for the amount of time they spend in their reading, the number of books that they read, and they can trade them in for prizes. In the beginning, they do it for the prizes, but it doesn't take long before their academic performance begins to improve. And we particularly target Title I schools where kids come from homes with no books and they go to schools with no libraries. Those are the ones who drop out. And we need to truncate that process early on because we can't afford to waste any of those young people. For every one of those people that we keep from going down that path of self-destruction and mediocrity, that's one less person you have to protect yourself and your family from. One less person you have to pay for in the penal or the welfare system. One more tax-paying, productive member of society who may invent a new energy source or come up with a cure for cancer. They're all important to us, and we need every single one of them. It makes a difference. And when you go home tonight, please read about it. Carson Scholars Fund. CarsonScholars.org. But why is it so important that we educate our people? Because we don't want to go down the same pathway as many other pinnacle nations who have preceded us. I think particularly about ancient Rome. Very powerful. Nobody could even challenge them militarily. But what happened to them? They destroyed themselves from within. Moral decay. Fiscal irresponsibility. They destroyed themselves. And if you don't think that can happen to America, you get out your books and you start reading. But we can fix it. Why can we fix it? Because we're smart. We have some of the most intellectually gifted people leading our nation. All we need to do is remember what our real responsibilities are so we can solve the problems. I think about these problems all the time. And, my role model was Jesus. And he used parables to help people understand things. And one of our big problems right now, and like I said, I'm not politically correct, so I'm sorry. But, our deficit is a big problem. Here's the parable. A family falls on hard times. Dad loses his job or is demoted, gets part-time work. He has 5 children. He comes to the 5 children. He says, we're going to have to reduce your allowance. Well, they're not happy about it, but he said, except for John and Susan. They're special. They get to keep their allowance. In fact, we may give them more. How do you think that's going to go down? Not too well. Same thing happens. Enough said. What about our taxation system? So complex. There is no one who can possibly comply with every jot and tittle of our tax. If I wanted to get you or you, I could get you on a tax issue. That doesn't make any sense. What we need to do is come up with something that's simple. And when I pick up my Bible, you know what I see? I see the fairest individual in the universe, God, and he's given us a system. It's called tithe. Now, we don't necessarily have to do it 10%, but it's principle. He didn't say, if your crops fail, don't give me any tithes. He didn't say, if you have a bumper crop, give me triple tithes. So there must be something inherently fair about proportionality. You make $10 billion, you put in $1 billion. You make $10, you put in $1. Of course, you got to get rid of the loopholes. But now some people say, well, that's not fair because it doesn't hurt the guy who made $10 billion as much as the guy who made 10. Where does it say you have to hurt the guy? He just put $1 billion in the pot. We don't need to hurt him. It's that kind of thinking It's that kind of thinking that has resulted in 602 banks in the Cayman Islands. That money needs to be back here, building our infrastructure and creating jobs. And we're smart enough to figure out how to do that. We've already started down the path of solving one of the other big problems, healthcare. We need to have good healthcare for everybody. It's the most important thing that a person can have. Money means nothing, titles means nothing when you don't have your health. But we got to figure out efficient ways to do it. We spend a lot of money on healthcare, twice as much per capita as anybody else in the world, and yet not very efficient. What can we do? Here's my solution. When a person is born, give them a birth certificate, an electronic medical record, and a health savings account, to which money can be contributed pre-tax from the time you're born to the time you die. When you die, you can pass it on to your family members so that when you're 85 years old and you got 6 diseases, you're not trying to spend up everything. You're happy to pass it on, and there's nobody talking about death panels. That's number one. And also, for the people who are indigent, who don't have any money, we can make contributions to their HSA each month because we already have this huge pot of money. Instead of sending it to some bureaucracy, let's put it in their HSAs. Now they have some control over their own health care. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to learn very quickly how to be responsible. When Mr. Jones gets that diabetic foot ulcer, he's not going to the emergency room and blowing a big chunk of it. He's going to go to the clinic. He learns that very quickly. Gets the same treatment. In the emergency room, they send him out. In the clinic, they say, now let's get your diabetes under control so you're not back here in 3 weeks with another problem. That's how we begin to solve these kinds of problems. It's much more complex than that, and I don't have time to go into it all. But we can do all of these things because we're smart people. What about the symbol of our nation? The eagle, the bald eagle. It's an interesting story how we chose that. But a lot of people think we call it the bald eagle because it looks like it has a bald head. That's not the reason. It comes from the Old English word piebald, which means crowned with white. And we just shorten it to bald. Now use that the next time you see somebody who thinks they know everything. You get them on that one. But why is that eagle able to fly high? Forward, because it has 2 wings, a left wing and a right wing.
What's the reaction been so far?
The reaction has been overwhelming. We've been just deluged with emails, with calls, 99.5% positive.
Wow.
And that doesn't surprise me because the way that I laid things out was really logical. It wasn't right wing, it wasn't left wing. It was just logic and common sense. And this is what people are starving for coming out of Washington, D.C. I don't know where we left our brains.
I don't know where we did it. You talked a lot about political correctness. You said it's dangerous. You said it muzzles people. You said there's a PC police force out there. You said it prevents people from saying what they mean. That we need to get over our sensitivity. Explain.
Yeah. Well, here's a nation, one of the founding pillars was freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And yet, we have imposed upon people restrictions on what they can say, on what they can think. And the media, I think, is the largest proponent of this, crucifying people who say things really quite innocently. I mean, you think back a few weeks ago, the sportscaster who commented on the beauty of the quarterback's female, and people thought, that can't be right. And there was a big brouhaha, and then finally they realized, well, I guess there's nothing wrong with it. And the woman even was thankful for the compliment. But this is the level of silliness that we've risen to. It really didn't matter who I was sitting in front of, because I always pray before I give a speech, and I ask God to give me the right things to say. And I think that it's very rare these days for people to speak the truth. Everybody wants to go along to get along. And in the meantime, the fabric of our nation is being destroyed. We're going from a can-do nation to a what can you do for me nation. And I don't think that's what most people want. But, it's presented to them as the thing to do. And one of the real dangers which I alluded to in the speech, is the fact that people don't know anything. They don't know about history. They don't know about technology. They know so little that the news media is able to tell them whatever they want them to think. And they say it enough times and people say, oh, yeah, well, that's what they said on the news. And they don't think for themselves. The founders of our nation said, our nation will fundamentally change when people become so ignorant that they can be easily led.
Would you ever run for president, sir?
If the Lord grabbed me by the collar and made me do it, I would. It's not my intention.
I wouldn't wish that on you, but I think I would vote for you in a heartbeat.
Well, thank you. I have so many emails from people saying that I could probably finance my campaign if each one gave me a nickel.
Okay. What about, you gave a warning, though, about America. I share your concern. Morally, I see a decay in the country. $16.5 trillion in debt scares me. We're stealing from our kids. You came up with a great idea. I've always believed in health savings accounts. I don't like class warfare. What can we do to change things? You said we could either go down the direction of Rome, or we can change things.
Yeah, well, I think the brave leaders, not the ones who are just wrapped up in their egos. And, you know, I'm not pointing this at any particular person or at any particular party. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of people with a lot of hubris which just thinks my way or the highway. And the reason that I gave the example of the eagle with two wings, a left wing and a right wing, is that all good ideals don't reside in one party. But as the Bible says, in a multitude of counselors is safety. But in order to be able to use those counselors, we got to get rid of political correctness and let people say what they mean and really put their ideals out on the table and explain why those are good ideals. I would be willing to debate anyone on the president's team on health care and how it should be administered and how it can be done for less money.
I'll tell you what
I don't get a chance to do that.
Because we're running out of time, and I want you to come back and tell the story. You explained it so well on Francis Scott Key. I'm going to invite Austin Goolsbee on with you, and if you would come next week, maybe we can talk about those issues. Your book is amazing. The speech was amazing. I put it on my website, Hannity.com.